Today is October 2023. We're into the third set of interviews, and today we're going to talk to Kenny Plemel. I guess I should say Ken Plemel.
I do it.
I know, but I know you as Kenny Plemel. Who was very, very active in Boy Scouts, and so we wanted to get a little bit of background, Ken, just on what your memories are of Scouts, some of the things you did, some of the places you went. So, first of all, give us a little bit of background about your family, because you're from Nipigon.
Well, we moved to Nipigon in the year before the flood. I think it's 59 or 60.
Oh,
we moved from St. Gregor, Saskatchewan, and we were in Thunder Bay for possibly 2 years, and then moved to Nipigon. My dad was the milk truck, Palm Dairies.
I didn't remember him being on Palm.
Okay, he started Co-op, and then they went to Palm when the two companies commingled. And
so how did your dad evolve from the milk truck to the garage?
I think the milk kind of went out, and he knew Hank pretty well, so he worked at the garage with Hank.
Hank Gerlach.
Hank Gerlach. And then he eventually, I think him and Wilbert Allen bought the garage from Hank.
Right.
And then he stayed there until Donnie Evans bought him out.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, Leo's Pop Shop and Leo's Esso, and it was quite a bit of
your dad was
Nipigon service. Correct.
Your dad was active in the community anyway.
Yes.
And in Scouts, right?
And in Scouts. He was on the group committee, and I believe he was something to do at the district. He'd go to district meetings all the time. I don't think he was district commissioner, but he was involved with the whole district, with the Scouts.
Okay, so did you start as a cub?
I started as a cub, yes. I can't even recall the leaders back then. Mike Hutchetois, I remember.
Right.
And then when there was enough of us moved up to Scouts at the same time that we created our own patrol of all new guys.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember Dale Andrewchuk's name. I'm not 100% sure I remember him as my Scout leader, or if it was, before we moved up, we went the year before just to meet everybody.
Right.
And so I don't know if that's where it was.
Where did you meet?
At the public school at that point.
Okay.
And then it changed to St. Ed's later. I don't remember at what point it changed. I can't even remember some of the early leaders. I remember Ron Larson Reigner being very much involved. He was district commissioner for a while. And Rodney and Derek were both in Scouts when I was.
Was Ted Nyman involved when you were there?
Ted was involved.
Right, okay.
As a leader, I'm not sure, possibly.
Of course, there was the
quite
board
a
or
few.
the group that ran or
It was
coordinated all the
the
stuff.
group committee.
Right.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Legion, when members joined the Legion, they had an area that they wanted to focus on in the community.
Oh, I see.
And Dad was picked Scouts, along with Jean Lenard. There was quite a few, actually. Again, I'm having a hard time with all the names.
Okay.
But,
Some of the things you remember doing then as a Scout.
Well, I was possibly the second Queen Scout in Nipigon.
And tell us how you get to be a Queen Scout.
There was a certain number of badges and patches in different areas that you had to get, and you had to be what they called at that time a first-class Scout to do it. And that was, again, you had to get badges and process your way up from second class to first class. And on the trip, when I got to Queen Scout, it was Governor General or Lieutenant Governor Roland Michener. I can't remember his title, but I still had pictures. And many years later in our office, Mrs. LeMay came in with a copy of that picture for me.
Oh, nice.
So that was kind of, because she was Dale Andrewchuk's.
Where did you travel to get that award?
Winnipeg.
Oh, Winnipeg.
Winnipeg. Prior to that, well, we had a lot of local day hikes and camping trips and things like that went on. Red Rock, not Red Rock, they had the Scout camp. I think it was Red Rock, had the Scout camp at Stewart Lake, so there was sometimes a week-long camporee there.
Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot that Stewart Lake.
George Grosberg was, at that time, was the leader in Red Rock.
Right.
And there was a few others that were assistants at the camps, but again, over the years.
Right.
And then I developed right up into they called Ventures was older scouts, and we were leaders, helped as assistant scout leaders, and we had our own thing. The Fall Fishing Festival was a very big thing for scouts back then.
Okay.
We had the booth. May not be a good thing, but we sold cigarettes and penny candy. But because we had cigarettes, we were the only booth allowed, or one of the only booths allowed to stay open during a big monster dance.
Oh,
So we had a
my.
very good,
Wow, it made good money.
very good profit in
Wow.
the evenings.
See,
but I was the only one old enough to run it,
but
so
I
it was
was
me.
involved all those years, and I don't remember that.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
my
we had quite a
goodness.
few years in the booth.
Mm.
So that was, and then the older scouts and adventurers were the overnight cleanup crew. So scouts were very much involved
Right.
in the festival in the early days until I don't even know the demise of scouting in Nipigon, what happened, why it kind of phased out.
Right.
But it was fairly popular. I think there was probably 30 of us when I was in the scout group, and I believe in 8 or 10 adventurers. John McConnell was one of our leaders. We did. Thunder Bay had organized a canoe trip from Dog River to come to Old Fort William.
And John Pauloff was involved.
John was
in
involved,
that,
and John McConnell was involved.
because Herman got sucked into driving to Dog River with something to pick somebody up, and they said, "Let's just down the other side of Thunder Bay." Herman was.
Wraith.
Herman had to go to work the next morning. He got home about 3 in the morning from there.
Oh no.
And that's his memory of the Boy Scouts
I'm
there.
surprised they picked up in Dog River because that's where we started. That's where we were all dropped off.
Wow.
But maybe somebody had an issue. But yeah,
So from Dog River, where did
we came through Dog River to Dog Lake, and then from the campsite at Dog Lake, we were trucked by Army Reserve to exactly where we were put back in the river. I'm not sure, but we had to come back out, so we didn't go around Kekaveka.
Oh yeah.
And then we had another night overnight, and then we were put back in the river, and we came out of Old Fort William, right on the boat launch at Old Fort
all
William.
you boys have to take a course on canoeing?
No. There was one leader and 3 boys that made up a little group, and 2 canoes.
Wow.
So a leader and one of the scouts was in one canoe, and 2 scouts in the other canoe. So it was a pretty long, tough slog.
Yeah.
The organizing group were all in cahoots there. Every time one of the boys said, "How much farther? How much farther?" "Oh, a mile and a bit." That was the answer. All the way through.
Oh.
And there's one big bay on Dog Lake where they were scared to go by during daylight because the wind was so bad. So we were all rafted, 140 canoes kind of rafted together on the lake.
Oh.
And when the wind died down, they finally let us go in, and they had power boats around the sides to kind of keep everybody together.
Oh,
I think we got into the campsite about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
I remember John on that one because he said, "I recognize car lights from a distance, and I can tell you we're 2 miles out." So that was the John Potoff man.
Yeah, I remember him going there for sure. And so how old would you have been on that kind of a trip?
That one I would have been older. I was probably one of the leaders then, so I'd have probably been 17, 16,
Oh, okay.
17.
Okay.
In '67, I went to the World Scout Jamboree in Boise, Idaho. It was 55,000 scouts from, I forget what it
Across
was,
the world.
200 countries.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting.
Mhm.
You learned how to talk in sign language. The big thing then was swapping badges and parts of your uniform, neckerchief, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you could always make a trade without being able to speak the
Right.
language.
Right.
It was pretty neat experience. We had a British troop on one side and a Chinese group on the other side of us, and a second British troop.
Who went with you?
It was just myself and Roger Guverman from Red Rock.
Oh.
That was the only ones from here. One of the leaders happened to be Paul Mengelberg from Long Lac. He
Yep.
was very involved in the group, in the organizations
He
too.
came to Nipigon a few times because
Yes.
I met him
Yeah.
and take pictures of him.
I
too.
believe he was from the POW camp in Red Rock and moved back.
Oh,
moved
you're
back to
right.
Canada.
You're right. That was a
I'm
history
kind of
about
pretty
him.
sure, yeah.
Right.
And I met him in Long Lac a few times in our later, not our later years, his later years.
Right. Right. No, do they still have World Jamborees for Scouts?
I believe so. I think I just saw something on the news about one. I'm not positive if it still goes on, but I think so.
Okay.
There was something
Makes you wonder how many Scouts there are,
worldwide.
even in Canada now.
In Canada, I don't even know. I know there's, even Thunder Bay has Cub Packs. My sister is a leader.
Oh, is she?
Yes, she got involved. I have two sisters, but one moved to New Liskeard and she's not involved down there.
Okay.
But Jessie in Thunder Bay is a Cub leader.
It's too bad it just petered out here. I
Yeah,
don't know
and
what happened.
I don't know what happened, and
Same with Girl
I can't
Guides.
even tell when. It just kind of fizzled
Scouts
out.
and Guides were big organizations years
Very
ago.
big, yeah. You were very big in the Guides.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just think the Guides were active in the community as the Scouts were in those days.
Mhm.
And then gradually, I can't even remember how we faded out.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Well, you had a big camp at
At
Polly
Polly
Lake.
Lake, right.
We were just in the process of developing one at Pine Portage for the
Pine
Scouts.
Portage. And the Guides stayed at Pine Portage because Bill Locker was involved
Yes,
with
Bill was
Edna.
involved,
And,
yes.
and so we stayed at that Scout camp.
I forgot about
Yeah,
that. But
that,
yes,
that
it
was that's quite a nice spot up there.
That was I think an old hydro. That hydro
I
either
think so.
donated or sold for $10.
Or it was a
something.
bush camp maybe even,
Yeah, it's possible. It was just off the hydro site at Pine Portage, I believe.
yes.
Just not too far from there.
Yeah, it's just up from Pine a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, I can't remember how that evolved, that you got a hold of that. Somebody knew somebody, I guess, that,
Well, we're looking for areas in who was it from M&R? Was involved too, helping us find sites, and we had 4 or 5 sites to check out, and that one was the one chosen.
so the one at Stewart Lake kind of died away too then.
That's gone, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was the Red Rock group had that. I think that's sold as a private, and somebody
Oh.
built a private camp on it.
Right, right.
In Ventures, we had an overnight winter hike to there, and we stayed up there,
Oh.
just in the lodge. We had a tent, but we had meals and everything in the little cabin that
Right,
was there. So,
right.
yeah, it was kind of.
Because the one at Pine was very nice.
Yeah, I don't remember ever staying there. I remember one of the bush camps donating, must have shut down, probably 300 of those fuzzy, itchy old gray blankets. And we had them in a cupboard at the house waiting for the camp to open to take them there.
Yeah, to take them up, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was, but yeah, there was always a lot of input and a lot of local and group donations to the
Right.
scouting organization.
So what's your
I imagine,
recollection of the Apple Day?
It's the only once a year I ate apples now. We yeah, you go door to door with the basket, and
Can you remember
get
how
some
they
pretty
arrived
good
here?
donations.
Can you remember how we got the apples?
One of I think they alternated. One of the stores. I remember the one year was Saunders had a couple cases for us, and then it was just donated by the local businessman, I believe, the
Oh.
Zeckners, and then I remember Clarence having them one year.
Oh, so the apples were all donated,
All donated,
and
yeah.
then the
And
Scouts
then we
sold
just
them. Oh,
so if you got a nickel an apple, it was a nickel profit.
right,
And back then, the nickel was pretty good.
for the nickel, right.
You start collecting that many nickels.
And I had no idea of the background there. I had no idea they were donated. I never thought
Yeah.
of that side of it then.
Well,
So it was a fundraiser.
It was, I know we got the apples at the stores, the different stores, so I believe the Bay maybe even once. I don't know if, when they still had the store. I remember going to a store to get them. Now, whether they were brought in for them or they donated them on their own, I have no
Okay.
idea at
Okay.
that part of it. The other fundraiser we had was a bottle drive. We had that once a year too.
Okay,
And that was-
right.
And we'd collect any kind of bottles. If it was just garbage bottles, we'd look after taking them out to the landfill. We're not supposed to anymore. Glass.
Yeah, that's where it's going
But
still.
now it's going to recycle. So,
Right, right.
but yeah, it was beer and pop were the really good ones, and anything else we'd take just to help the homeowners out. And
Right.
we'd have
Can you remember, did you get money for the pop bottles in those days?
yes,
You did,
yeah,
eh?
pop bottles and the beer bottles.
What a shame. Well, we don't have the pop bottles too much now,
No.
so.
We one year was Tony Peel's garage was the collection point up on whatever that is, 6th Street maybe.
Yeah,
And another year was, oh, it's going back a ways. Lakehead Freightways had the freight depot behind the Legion.
right,
and that was a collection spot
Okay.
one year. And they would send a beer truck over from the beer store to pick up all the beer bottles.
Oh my goodness.
So we had a fairly good collection. Like, there was a couple of pallets every time.
Yeah.
Too much for you to carry over and take them in.
Oh, good.
So it was a fairly good fundraiser.
Yeah. That's two ways to raise money then, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, that was two big, and then the festival booth at the festival was.
You
that
got
was
paid to
really
do the
big.
cleanup.
Yes.
You did.
Yes.
Right. Right.
And then, 2 I believe, the ventures got paid, I'm not sure if it's from CP, to do the lawn from behind the beer store all the way up to the gully at the other end.
Oh.
So we would, some of the herd, a couple of the herd, Terry and Kevin helped me on that quite a bit.
Oh.
So we'd take 2-3 days and cut the grass all the way. We finally bought our own lawnmower for that. But yeah, that was another little fundraiser.
Wouldn't have known that.
So that one was, I think, two years maybe I did that. And that might have been when I was in the venture side of it. But yeah, it was quite a. It was. I'm happy that I went through the process of Scouts. You learn a lot of stuff. And,
Yeah.
you get a lot of camaraderie, and there was all kinds of trips out to the bush.
We were just talking to Helen and saying those organizations provided opportunities, Ken, that wouldn't have happened. You wouldn't have traveled here or traveled there.
That's right.
If you hadn't been part of those things.
I'd have never been at anything like the World Jamboree. The world was smaller then.
Yeah.
Right now the world the world was bigger then. Now it's so small that
Right.
back in those days, if you knew of anybody that ever went to Disney World, they were a hero in your mind. They traveled the world.
Yep.
Now, when we had the tax business, we had clients from Japan that lived in Japan. They were Canadian, but they lived in Japan. It was worldwide. We had Nunavut. We had every province except Quebec, because they have their own tax laws, so I couldn't do their tax. But yeah, it's such a small world now that people are everywhere.
Yeah.
Back then, it was,
Well, I can remember interviewing Ethel Douglas because she went to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big
That
deal
would be a
to go to
huge
Florida
thing.
then, her and somebody else. And now I look at that and I think, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was just so different back then.
Yeah.
The scope of travel was, Thunder Bay was a day trip.
Right.
Back then, so.
Did
it
you
was kinda,
take, okay, leave it there. I was gonna say, did you take part with any scouts in Thunder Bay sometimes?
Actually, we did. A couple of little things up there. We went to a couple jamborees at down Boy Scout Road. They had a camp. We were at camp there. We had to build an suspension bridge over a small ravine.
Oh,
That's part of the
okay.
process.
Okay,
yeah,
that's good,
that's
thank
it.
you, Kirsten. So we're October 2023, and we're taking advantage of Ken Plemel being here just to talk about the difference in the tax, income tax business
Income tax.
over the 25 years that he took part. So maybe start how you got into that business, Ken.
Well, I took H&R Block course when I was a kid, and I started doing my own from that point on. Did a couple of families, and when Bob Cusick took over the garage after my dad was sick and passed, then Bob asked me to come on board doing bookkeeping and taxes with him. And after 5 years, then he was ready to retire. And we just kept it up. Debbie and I just kept it up from that point. So it was, it was actually extremely interesting.
So was Debbie a qualified person to do that too?
During the summer that we decided to do it, she took a course with, I think at that time it was probably Liberty Tax, and it was a correspondence course
Oh, okay.
through them.
So then the both of you were working together
Working
then?
together. We
Okay.
did have a little bit of issues at the beginning where I'd get off work at 3 and she'd leave for work at 2, so we had nobody in the house for a while, and that's when my daughter was there for 1 or 2 years, and then we brought Jeannie Dahl on board to fill in that gap, and then she just stayed right with us right till the end, and then she moved on with the new people for a few years.
So bulk of your business time was out of your own home?
Yeah, all of it.
Okay.
All of it, yeah. The last year with Bob, we had a little office beside the insurance office.
Right,
That little,
Oh.
the old Durhurst
Yeah.
office before they
Right.
moved into the bank building.
right.
And we had that one year, but that was it. And that was Louise Dupuy and myself worked for Bob that year.
Okay,
And we brought it onto Main Street. But yeah, it was pretty much out of the house. One of the big things was in the early days, as people retire, there was a small retirement from the mills around here. We were industrial, right? We had a lot of industry, so there was a lot of small pensions. But the wives had no income. Old age pension, because they didn't work, so they didn't have Canada pension. Most of the people back then was just the single earner. And there was a lot of ways then that you could split incomes, do different things to make it a little bit better. But a lot of the incomes weren't high enough that you had to you could make
Wow.
any really big savings because they're barely taxable in some cases.
wow.
So it it's
So
kind of neat.
I would
all the
assume
different
now that you
programs.
mention that, the women that worked at a store, I think, never got a pension. Those stores did not do those
They
things.
didn't offer pensions,
No.
and a lot of them didn't have enough time to get any Canada pension
Oh,
because you had to have so much. You had to work enough. I know the last few years, Dad had to grad. He got Mum to work with him to try and get a Canada pension, and Bob kept her on for the same reason. And I think her Canada pension, dollars a month, just
oh my.
under $100 a month.
Wow.
So it took a while to develop a Canada pension. So most of the income came from the husbands, from the men, and it seems it seems wrong to say that now, but it's just the fact of life back then.
Right.
And as things developed and more women got into industry, and both mills, Nipigon and Red Rock, had a lot of ladies working at it, and all of a sudden the Canada pensions, you'd start the next generation, you would see the Canada pensions kick in for the ladies. So
Right,
it was nice that they would have a little bit extra incomes in the family.
right.
There was several times where the child tax benefit would be taxable.
Right.
So if you were making any kind of income, it actually cost you to get the child tax benefit. Because the benefit was based on the lowest tax rate. If you were in the next tax bracket, you paid tax on that money
Oh,
higher than, so it was actually sometimes not a benefit.
right,
And
right.
they got rid of that, and then the Harper government brought it back again, and that was for, I think, to pay child care under 6 years old. But it was taxable to everybody, and everybody had to get it that had children at that age. Didn't matter your income level, so the higher income people were, again, they were not very happy about that
Right,
because it was costing them to get this money.
right.
So it, yeah.
When you
it
first
all
started, was it all paperwork?
Oh
No
yeah.
computer?
No, computer. I started.
you
Well,
had
when
it-
I first started, it was paper. I started with Bob, and it was computer. That's when I bought my first computer,
Oh, okay.
and
Okay.
I've probably had 30 since.
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking of the work involved there. And I guess, I mean, when I did my own, it was all paper, so
Yeah,
it was,
and it was the computer program made it a lot easier, and the program developed huge over the years too. When we finished, we kept with the same program right from when Bob started till I finished, and the program had developed so much. It just made it so much easier. It would catch a lot of stuff for you. If you didn't catch it on the way by, it would catch it for you.
well,
There's lots of diagnostics and lots of suggestions and hints that would come out.
so
That was a
did
big,
you have to
huge
take
thing.
a sort of refresher course along the way at all? Like, I mean, did things change drastically?
There was a couple of big things that happened, and we did. Debbie and I went to. I think we went to Calgary because the timing worked better to do the Calgary course put on by Tax Prep. They would do every year a course, and they would highlight all the new stuff. And that was the year the pension splitting came out, where spouses could split on paper their company pensions.
Right.
So that could make a big difference too.
Was that a good thing?
That was a very good thing. We've seen cases where it might only help $30 or $40 for the couple, right up to $5,000, $6,000
Oh.
benefit, especially when one was really high income compared to the other.
Right.
That really made a big difference then. because you could take money from a higher tax bracket and move it to a lower tax bracket. Next year you didn't need to use the same numbers, yet whatever percentage worked in that tax year, that's what you used. The money always stayed in the name of the person who it came from. It was just on paper you could do that. It was a really big thing. And then again, as incomes equaled out, more women in the workplace and the better jobs, you know, the hospital had more people, the schools had more teachers, so the incomes leveled out a little more, and it wasn't as big of a thing, but it was still really big.
Right, right.
And back in the early days, RSPs was only people could afford it would do RSPs. And then it developed where a lot more people got into RSPs, and then the spousal RSP thing came in, which made a difference. And then all of a sudden the tax-free savings account started, and you know, RSPs were probably not as good of a thing. It probably should be part of a portfolio, but the tax-free savings was a lot bigger benefit.
So did you find overall that people were good at saving all their slips for you, or did you have to do a lot of digging sometimes?
I'd say for the most part it was pretty good. A lot of times when people weren't aware of something, like claiming medical expenses, was a big thing around here because we're out of Thunder Bay and you have to travel for everything, right? So you could claim travel grants and people didn't know about that. So they didn't have records of when they went or who they went to see or any of that kind of stuff. A lot of donation slips until you start pestering people year after year, then they start saving them. But I only give $20 a year. What's the point of saving it? And,
well, I just thought I was so smart when I did Herman's and mine myself, and then all of a sudden I found out I had missed so much over the years by doing it myself. So even though it cost me to have you do it, it was a benefit because I gained more than I paid out. But you just
and that happened quite
just
often.
naive about doing it yourself, and I'm not a financial person, so
I believe the program helped a lot with that too. Had you got a small, like nowadays they have TurboTax and some of these others, and you don't even have to know your documents. It'll start and they'll ask you all these questions, and it'll get your background. Do you go see a doctor? Do you donate money? Where do you work? What is your income? And then it asks for the specific to enter it. So there's all these little things that come up. I got surprised by one. I was doing one of my sisters 2 years ago or last year, and I started looking at an Ontario credit for them for something, and I come across another one. They called it a staycation credit. I had never heard of it. So I looked it up, and if you traveled and stayed in Ontario, you could claim a portion of your hotel bills. Nothing else. Like if you went to, into museums, and none of that fees were anything. It was just the hotel bills, and if you were in Ontario.
wow.
And I just found that out, and it's too late to do anything because I find this out in March of the next year.
Right.
So I told everybody then, if you do anything in Ontario this year, keep your hotel receipts because it may be back. It says it's a temporary credit. I've seen temporary credits for 10 years.
So was a staycation a certain length of time?
No, it just couldn't be for work. It couldn't be for medical. It had to be only for pleasure.
Oh my goodness.
It was to keep people in Ontario.
Right.
And it started the year, I think it was the year after COVID, so that they could start getting people traveling, but not traveling far enough that it was a problem.
So is it still there?
This year I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Interesting.
I haven't seen any of the new. I always go online about February and look at all the new guides now to try and see if it's there.
Interesting.
But I told everybody to hang on to it just in case.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's not there, you throw the paper away. If it's there, you have it.
Right.
It's that simple. And that was the thing all along. Anything that was questionable. Medical was a big claim. And anything you think might be medical, keep the paperwork.
Yeah.
We'll sort it out at the end.
So just on another note about that, when the two mills ended up closing, did that have a big impact or taxed your ability to do all that?
It was pretty, lots of research in those years, and it was pretty, it opened your mind really big because you had, first the mills went down and there was some severances. With the plywood mill burning, they had to pay a severance because they couldn't give you notice, obviously. So you had severance, and then you had employment insurance if you qualified, and then the pensions would wound up. So then there was the pension rollovers. So there was quite a bit of learning curve on that one. I like to think we kept up really well because we talked to, I must have had 20 financial advisors on a first name basis at the time, because you would, somebody would have this fella, you'd have to phone them to get information. Somebody have somebody else, you'd have to phone them for information. A lot of the banks and a lot of the finance companies had set up, in Nipigon they'd set up an evening where you could go and listen to them.
Okay.
They were kind of trying to get your business right.
Right.
And there would be a lot of comments made that I knew that were, no, you better tell the rest of the story here.
Right.
So we'd ask the questions at the meetings to make them come out with it. We had a lot of people that were told, you're hiding your money, you don't have to worry. They would put it into an RSP, they have room. But then they would take it out of the RSP, which would make it taxable in that same year. And they were told if you take out under $5,000 at a time, it's only 10% tax withholding. So you do that, you add it up at the end of the year, you're in another tax bracket, you need a 25% tax withholding. So to have to tell somebody they owe $10,000 just after they lost their job wasn't a very pleasant thing.
No.
And
I can remember hearing a few people talk about that.
That happened
You're
to a lot of people.
Yes.
And I have to say that the people were very good. They blew off steam. But it wasn't at us. It was at the government, at the situation, at the people that gave them that advice. But
And lots
they're
of
in
them,
the office, so that's where you hear it.
and lots of them didn't get a job right away.
Correct.
To pay some of that
To
back
pay it
again.
back. It was tough.
That's right. It was tough.
But the government was really good with, they knew the area, and they were kind of a little bit more lenient about collecting. They would, as long as you tried, send them $100 a month or $100 every couple of months, they'd leave you alone for a while. So they were very, very understandable. You don't hear that about government agencies, but in this case they were.
Right.
And over the course of time that we had the business, I've probably made, I don't know, 3,000 to 5,000 phone calls to Revenue Canada. And only twice I can recall being not a very pleasant person on the other end. So again, their representatives on the phone were very good, if they couldn't. But I found a trick. You would ask a really hard question, the first person that answers, and they couldn't answer it, they have to move you up a tier. And you ask another hard question, they'd move you up a tier, and then you got to talk to somebody that knew what they were doing.
Right.
And then it was really good. And if they couldn't answer, they'd get a researcher to phone you back.
Right.
And we had several of that happening too, and they were really good.
Right.
Saved a lot of money, a lot of people, a lot of money with those
With
with those phone calls.
Right. Right. Oh, that's good. No, it's just an interesting time, isn't it, for
Yes.
when all those changes are going on all the time. And when I listen to the news now, some people must get hard hit. They got no jobs, no place to stay. They've got no money for anything. So
Yeah,
it makes you
really
wonder.
tough.
Yeah, tough times.
Yeah, it's kind of makes it really bad.
So do you miss the job at all?
I don't miss doing the tax. I really miss the people. We had 1,600 clients at the end, so
Wow.
it was a lot of people that you see once a year. Well, twice a year. Once when they drop off, once when they pick up.
Right.
And sometimes it was the wife would drop off, the husband would pick up, vice versa. So it was kind of at least you get to see
Right.
once a year, and I really miss that.
Right.
That
Well,
was the big part.
Your
of it.
business certainly did a service to people that needed it. That's something that everybody has to do.
Well,
And so there has to be somebody to do it.
I think a lot of the times that's how we treated it, was as a public service rather than a business. And
Right.
when the mills went down, well, you can't increase prices, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of, but we did okay.
That's good.
Put in our 100 hours a week for the 3 months, and then we were happy.
Right.
We did have a study. I can't remember the group in Thunder Bay. The lady came to the door and said, "You've been selected to be on this study. Once a week we'll phone you, and you have to give us your work hours." And so the first week when they phoned and I gave the hours, she said, no, we're talking a 1 week period. I said, so am I. I had 100 hours and Debbie had like 95. I said, she takes time off to make supper. That was it.
Wow.
So it was, and that's when we had Jan, Frankham, and Jeannie working with us.
That's right.
And sometimes we had Peggy for a couple of years for part-time, and
Right.
Kathy Smith. So we did have a few others in and out.
Right.
Danielle Thompson for
So you
couple
gave
years.
employment for 3 months to some
Three-
people as
yes.
well.
And it was,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And,
So in the
it was
meantime, though, you worked at the plywood mill.
Yes,
Right.
and Debbie worked at Domtar.
And Debbie at Domtar. So
She was cleaning at Domtar, so she
Yeah.
was evenings all the time.
busy people.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. That's an interesting interview that I hadn't anticipated.
Yeah,
Thanks, Chris.
it's-